Welcome to the third season of the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. As an autoimmune warrior myself, I understand living with chronic illness isn't easy. You're not alone. This podcast is made to give hope. I will interview individuals living with autoimmunity along with experts and businesses to help provide knowledge and support. As a health coach, I understand there is no cure for autoimmune disease, but creating small changes to lifestyle can influence how we feel. And shout out to all my listeners out there because this podcast is made possible by you. And how can you support? Glad you asked. There are 3 ways to show your support. 1, rate the show on Spotify. 2, leave a review through Apple. And 3, share the episode with a warrior so they too can have hope and be stronger than autoimmune. And enough of this intro. Let's get started. All right. Thank you so much for joining me on the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast, Atavia. Did I say that right? Atavia.
You said it right. Atavia, you got it in one.
All right, Atavia. Can you share what it's like during those years you were struggling with IBS and how it impacted your everyday life?
Yeah, sure. I mean, not a time that I like to revisit, but I'll do it. It's when I had IBS, it was I would say a time where my health basically just dictated everything, which I'm sure you can relate to and your listeners can relate to. It was basically like a big shadow that overcast over my entire life, and not in a good way. So it just, however I was feeling, it would be to such an extreme level that it would impact whether I could socialize, how tired I was, how much energy I had, how much I could concentrate. And the symptoms that I would experience were constant bloating, like bowling ball belly type, like, unbearable bloating, gas, like inconsistent stool habits. I would have really bad anxiety. I would just be really lethargic, didn't have very good sleep. And then nausea sometimes as well. And it also impacted my period. So I think the worst period I ever had, I almost fainted. Like I was on the floor, almost passing out because it was so painful. And I mean, I'm sure you know what it's like. It just takes over everything. Like you can't even go out and have a nice day out with friends because you just can't escape your own body, right? So it's just dictating everything. And even if you're having a quote unquote nice time, it's still there. Like it's still ruining the experience you're having
In the background.
You just feel that yeah, all the time. And then if it's not there, you're worried about when will it come up again and how will I feel tomorrow. And yeah, it was just very frustrating, depressing time, to be honest.
Yeah, I am so sorry you had to go through that. And it sounds like you went through that for many years. Do you know what age it started?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny one because I had always been quite like a sickly child. Like my mum said I was very fussy about what food I would eat. And I remember having tummy bugs quite a lot when I was younger, like a lot of like sticky bugs. But the IBS came on probably, I would say, my early 20s. I noticed it after like significant periods of stress and anxiety, I would say. And some trauma too.
Yeah. So a long time. What was that turning point? I mean, you went through so many years of dealing with this. What was the turning point for you to decide, okay, I need to change something? And you went into nutritional therapy, correct?
Yeah, I went into nutrition. So I think the turning point was going back and forth to the doctors, which I know so many people can relate to, going back and forth and asking, what's going on? And them saying, nothing, everything came back fine on the tests, or there's just nothing more you can do. You just have to live with it. And I'm quite stubborn and I like to be right about things, which I think can go in your favor or against your favor. But I thought, no, there's no way this just has to be how I live. Like I'm going to prove you wrong. So I decided, right, screw it. If you can't tell me what's going on, I'm going to find out myself. And my dad has a background in nutritional therapy. And so I thought, after years of just, rebelling, because no one really wants to listen to their parents, I thought, maybe he's right then. And then, looked into studying nutritional therapy and went to a taster day and thought, wow, this sounds incredible. It just sounds like it's going to be really empowering. So for me, it was personally just, I didn't like what I was being told and I didn't believe it. And I trusted my instinct that there's got to be more to it than this, than just, oh, this is just something you have to live with. So yeah, probably stubbornness was the thing that got me through it.
Yeah, I like what you said. Stubbornness could work in your favor or not in your favor, but it
Yeah.
sounds like it worked in your favor so far.
Yeah, definitely. In this situation, it did.
Yeah. And nowadays, everybody is using the term gaslighting. And
Mm,
I know it sounds like you went through that type of dismissal with your symptoms and doctors. How did you find the courage to move forward and say, I need to get answers?
mm. I think it's just how I am in my personality, to be honest. I think I never really listen that much to authority when they tell me something I don't like. Probably comes from being Greek, half Greek. We can be like that. And I think I didn't like what I heard, and I just thought, no, there's got to be something more. And I just trusted my instinct. And I think a lot of people, I think especially women, but also people who aren't women, but as especially women, we're told so much that this is just something you have to live with, or it's just hormones or whatever, and things like that really annoy me. So I just thought, I just need to go with my instinct and, ironically, trust my gut that my body's telling me something and I'm going to listen to my body over what this random doctor's telling me because, if the two things just didn't marry up, there was a bit of like cognitive dissonance there where, okay, you're telling me this is just like a normal gut stool test result and I just have to live with this. But my day to day life, that can't be normal. That cannot be the norm to wake up every day so concerned about where the next toilet will be, or just absolutely no energy, no zest for life. Like that can't be the norm. And something I like to tell people is to be a problem. If you're worried you're going to be a problem, be a problem. Like fine, it doesn't come back on you in any way. Like you if you have to make yourself a problem to get answers, it's fine. Yeah, which can be problematic. But I think we need to be confident in our self empowerment that we know our bodies and we know when something's not right, and we shouldn't have to live with long term conditions with absolutely nothing that we can do about it. It just didn't sit right with me.
I like how you said that. Be a problem.
Yeah.
It's okay. Be a pill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if we don't stand up for ourselves, I mean,
Hmm.
what else are we going to stand up for?
Exactly. And it's so easy. Like, I worked with people who were really had my best interest at heart as a doctor, but the reality is they were seeing sometimes, I don't know, like 30 patients a day. I was just one person they saw. I was a blip in their day, just a 10-minute, consultation, if that. They're not living the day-to-day situation that I was living. So I know it's my responsibility to tell them just how bad it is and to kind of make them listen, because it's so easy, when you're seeing 30 people a day or however many people doctors see, it a lot in the UK, to just not really, they don't grasp the seriousness of it, especially if the tests are coming back normal. They don't really know what you're experiencing. So yeah, if you have to be a problem, be a problem. Obviously in
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
constructive way.
I like that. I like how you said that. Be a problem, be a pill to
Mhm.
swallow, because that
Mhm.
will make you stand out.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just need an eye opener, like you were mentioning, because they see so many patients a day.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I want to switch to your background because you have a background in psychology and
Mhm.
counseling.
Mhm.
How did that play into your approach with your gut and your health?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely played a role. I think anxiety management hugely, and kind of like noticing that your mindset has such a big impact on how you experience your health problems. So I would implement things like radical acceptance, which took a while for me to do, but getting to the reality of just radically fully accepting the reality of my situation is I was a mess. That was my health. That was how I was. It was horrendous. But not necessarily just being like, well, that's how it is and that's how it will always be. Just radically accepting that situation, thinking, right, now I've accepted that's where I'm at. I'm not at the place I want to be where I'm free of health problems. I am experiencing this. What's the next step I need to take? And kind of trying to neutralize the thoughts and the feelings I was having around it, because I think having the health condition is one thing, but then having the emotional reaction to the health condition is a whole nother thing. And having the health issue is bad enough in itself, let alone piling on top frustration, anxiety, desperation to feel better, like wanting to get better on top. That just makes it 10 times worse. So I feel like having those mindset techniques just helped me to manage the moment rather than spiraling into, and I did spiral quite a lot into emotional, chaos and frustration and overwhelm. But using those techniques to try and neutralize it a bit just helped me to manage it day to day.
You mentioned certain mindset techniques. Do you mind sharing one with us or guiding us through one that can help people that are going through the same thing
Yeah,
that you did?
of course. So something I quite like doing, I worked in addiction work for a while, and something we would do is urge surfing. And that's when someone's got a really intense craving. And I mean, this can work in any situation. It can work when you're thinking of texting your ex and you think, I really shouldn't be doing that. That's fine. You can surf the urge. So essentially, what it means is you're just surfing. You imagine the urge for whatever it might be, or whatever emotion it might be. So for me, it was anxiety and overwhelm and desperation, where I'd want to sit up on Google, constantly Googling things and like desperately trying to find an answer to my IBS. The urge to do that, I would just surf it, because no emotion really lasts any longer than, I think some research says, like 90 seconds until the emotion goes. But it's the fact that we latch onto that emotion and then we build upon it and build upon it and build upon it. And then it just becomes, it engulfs you, kind of like a tidal wave. So I would just surf that urge to research and try and find an answer, because I would say to myself, right, if it's 11 p.m. now and you need to go to sleep, that's a good thing you can do for yourself and for your gut, is to get some good rest and let your body heal itself in your sleep. Will sitting up Googling for the next hour make you feel good? No, it won't. Will it find you a cure? No, it won't. Like, it won't do anything. So just that urge is coming from desperation to feel better. But rationally, I just need to let that urge come and then go. And I do that now with all types of things in my life. So I try and say that to clients,
Yes.
like, when you have that urge, just to kind of like surf it.
Yeah. And when you say surf it, just, I guess, not go with it, but just be in the moment. Don't go towards it. Don't undermine it. Almost like an acknowledge what is
Yeah.
going on in the moment and try to, it sounds like also trying to almost be logical with it. Like, hey, yeah, I've got this going on. I know the consequences if I go, and I know the consequences if I don't. So kind
Yeah.
of almost going through those things in the moment when
Definitely, and
that
it just helps to
triggers.
neutralize it. Yeah, rather than kind of being swept away by this if we look at it like a wave, rather than being swept away by the wave and then taken into this big whirlpool of whatever's going on, you just look at it for what it is and surf it, and you're just neutralizing it and saying, like, I recognize this. And it's not, like you say, it's definitely not undermining it or judging it, because it's just a natural, normal, emotional thing, thought to have. But just neutralizing and saying, okay, I recognize that's there. I can see it's trying. I'm, my body, my brain's trying to help me by having this thought, but it's not going to be constructive. And what is going to be constructive? It's like the thought having thoughts behind your thoughts, rather than just being dragged around by your thoughts, because it doesn't really get you anywhere.
Yeah, I like that. Don't want to be dragged down. And I know you have a mission for people that, especially millennials, that are going through IBS, and there's more autoimmune disease, and with people nowadays, especially since the big C word, or I heard it in another podcast where people call it athlete's foot. So we'll just call it athlete's foot. After athlete's foot, um, it's it's really become it's really triggered autoimmune disease among many people. So what are some challenges that you work with people that are some millennials that are managing IBS?
So the main first thing I look at, especially if someone has an autoimmune condition, is looking at leaky gut. So looking at how your gut is functioning. And I've got an episode specifically on leaky gut that I'll send to you, so if you want to link in the show notes, because it
Thank you.
explains, no problem. It kind of looks at what's the basis of autoimmune. And I mean, all autoimmune diseases present themselves differently, and like IBS presents itself differently, but something that can be a common factor is your gut being leaky. And what that essentially means is having tiny microscopic tears in your gut, like where you wouldn't see it if you looked at your gut, but they're like tiny microscopic holes, which can lead to things like bits of bacteria or toxins or food seeping through into your bloodstream, which then triggers inflammation, triggers your immune system to basically become dysregulated and maybe start attacking your own bodily tissues. And that's how you can get develop leaky autoimmune. And so something that I look at with people and with myself was, what are the causative factors of leaky gut? It can happen over years and years, and generally speaking, modern day, since probably, I think, post World War II, our food tends to be very processed. It's not organic. Like, organic is not the norm anymore. So we're eating so many pesticides, we're eating so many toxins, we've got plastic in our bloodstream. Like, we're just toxic generally. So we need to look at what's that doing to our gut. How is your gut microbiome? So all the organisms in your gut, you need very specific levels of different bacteria to protect your gut. You have on your gut lining, you have like a mucosal membrane, which protects your gut from anything seeping through. And if you're lacking a certain bacteria, a bacteria that makes that mucosal membrane strong, say you're not eating enough sort of veg or something, or you've got too many antibiotics, or you've so stressed and you've killed off that bacteria, it's not going to be able to keep your gut strong. So we need to look at the first thing, something like gut microbiome, to make sure you have all those bacteria that keep your gut healthy. And that's really important in most autoimmune disorders, because most people with autoimmune, I think, have leaky gut. So that tends to go hand in hand.
Yeah. And gut health has been such a buzzword, kind of like gaslighting lately. What are some misconceptions that you see with this, and how do you address them?
I think misconceptions tend to be that people have the same issue, like that IBS, for example, must just have one answer. And something I say to people is that IBS is really simple, but it's really complicated. So it's made to be so complex that nobody knows where to start. And it is complex. Each person's very individual, but at the same time, it's quite straightforward. So once you know what you're doing, it becomes really obvious. There are tend to be 4 things that I focus on with people in clinic and with my listeners is gut microbiome, food intolerances, inflammation in your gut, and stress. Those are 4 driving factors I usually see. And that might sound simple of you address those 4 factors, but obviously there's a lot in each of those 4 factors, and each person's will be very different. So mine is very stress predominant, whereas I work with people who they don't really, stress does have an impact, but it's mainly food intolerance predominant. It's the point where I've worked with someone where we took out one food and all of their symptoms went. So I try to tell people it's not difficult, but it's more simple than you're led to believe, but only when you know what you're doing, which obviously is a bit of a sounds like a bit of a contradiction. But
Yeah, a
not to
little
buy into
oxymoron.
fads. Yeah. It's like I'm saying one thing, then I'm saying another. But not to buy into fads of, oh, this yogurt drink is gonna cure my gut microbiome because it's got one type of bacteria and well, you have loads of different types of bacteria. Which one are you deficient in? So
Right.
yeah, that's something I try to let people know.
Yeah. That totally makes sense, because each individual is different, but the process is the same. Some people may not do well with XYZ. That's where that food intolerance comes from. So you're not going to use the same type of foods that might help somebody else, that's going to hurt somebody else.
Yeah.
So that totally makes sense.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
And you're mentioning that you did a lot of work, or you do a lot of work in addictive counseling. And for the people to me, it makes sense how they connect, but how do you, as a professional, bring that about, or how do you connect those two, the mental health with gut health? What is the connection?
Yeah, I mean, the gut and the brain are literally linked, firstly. So there's a physical link and there's a mental link. So when you're born or when you're a baby, you're just a bunch of nerve endings and you start to elongate as you grow and you become, like a full grown baby. And those nerve endings stretch between your brain and your gut. So they're literally linked and they're connected forever. So whatever's going on in your gut is going to be going on in your brain and vice versa. So if you have a really damaged gut microbiome and you've got quite a toxic environment in your gut where you need to store or synthesize serotonin, for example, it's not going to be a surprise if you have low serotonin levels and maybe have low mood or something like that, or brain fog. So there's very much a physical, a physiological link between the two, but also in terms of mentally and mental health, how I would work with people in sessions where we'd look at mindset or we'd look at, radical acceptance. changing behaviors. Like people, we're just such creatures of habit, and we always go down the path of least resistance because it's like an evolutionary conditioning that we want to conserve as much energy as possible, because we didn't used to be able to buy a pizza from Domino's like 5 minutes down the road. We'd have to scavenge and hunt and things like that. But that takes quite a big shift. If you're used to just eating what you want when you want, but it's caused you really bad health problems, it can take a lot of reconditioning and behavior change and behavior motivation to change your eating habits, and to not go to bed at midnight, but go to bed at 10 p.m. But a lot of people might see that as, well, why is that such a big deal? There can be a lot of resistance that we come up against when we are quote unquote forced to make these changes, because we're not doing it out of choice. We're doing it because our body's telling us, well, if you don't do that, then I'm going to be sick. So I use a lot of those techniques when I talk to people, to help them, encourage them, to make those changes and to feel motivated to do that.
Yeah. How do you not fight the resistance, but I guess what's another word for it, but how do you work with the resistance that people just keep on going into the same habits? How do you break that mold of like, you keep on doing the same things, you're going to get the same results?
Yeah. It definitely depends on the individual and their motivations, but something I like to remind people is to use something called fast forwarding the tape. So this, especially when people have food intolerances that have a slow onset. So we know, for example, that gluten triggers you, but you might not see horrendous symptoms, but 2 days later you're going to be bloated and you're going to feel lethargic. But it's not enough of a motivator. Like the pain isn't high enough to make you not eat gluten. So you keep eating gluten, but then you're frustrated with yourself. So I'll say to people, fast forward the tape. So before you eat that pizza, just stop and think, when I eat this, how am I going to feel? And it puts you mentally in that place, how you're going to feel if you do that behavior. And then you're starting to basically associate this food with this outcome, or this behavior with this outcome. And it's kind of like conditioning, a bit like Pavlov's dogs. You kind of condition yourself to be like, oh, this thing is bad or this thing is good. So that's one technique I'll use, just to help people to get in control of their own minds and behaviors, because I feel that's the most empowering thing you can do, really.
Do you feel that we're all kind of, I mean, because you mentioned everything we do is just, it's just a habit, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So you think we're just all kind of like Pavlov's dogs, when you ring that bell all the time?
I don't think we're all the time like that. I think I think humans are conditioned to do whatever is easiest, and a lot of us have conditioned behaviors, right? Because it's just, we get up, we go to work, or we do whatever we need to do. Our brains are so, we're ruled, I think it's like 90% by our subconscious brain. Because if we were thinking about everything all the time, I mean, my God, we've got anxiety as it is. Like, it would be even worse. But I think it's about bringing into awareness what you need to bring into awareness. So a lot of people, we tend to take for granted our health, or we tend to take for granted what we can eat. And when you realize you can't do that anymore, it comes as such a massive shock. And especially coming from like a Greek culture, half my family is Greek. Food is such a social thing. So to go over to Greece and not be able to eat gluten or not be able to eat dairy, that's a huge, barrier to socializing, essentially. So it's bringing into awareness what you need to bring into awareness. But I think a lot of people are conscious of a lot of things, and that's what can cause anxiety. So, you go one way or the other, I suppose, in most situations.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel the same way. I know, I think in every culture that food is such a connection for people. I mean, I think that's why now with homes, they're creating homes like the kitchen, the center of it all, because everybody connects around food. I mean, you have a birthday party, you have food, you go to visit somebody, the first thing they say, oh, you want something to eat, you want something to drink. You have the holidays, everything is like, well, what do you want me to bring? What can I bring? Smorgasbord. That's food. So I think every culture has their thing, whether it be, beans or salsa or milk, and all those things could be a triggering factor. So I like how you are really working with the individual to say, hey, you fast forward the tape, dude, because you really want to feel like XYZ later. So, what advice would you give somebody, since we're talking about fast forwarding the tape and radical acceptance? What advice would you give somebody that's just starting their journey with gut health or autoimmune disease or trying to fix things?
I think the first thing I would recommend is just to take a deep breath and honestly just like go easy on yourself, because it's so tempting to want to know the answer and to do all of the things straight away, but it's just not sustainable and it's not possible. And especially when you're starting out, like I'll be honest with my condition and my IBS is never something that I'll never have to think about. I have to think about it pretty much every day, and for me now it's just habit. Again, I've kind of conditioned myself for that to be a habit, so I don't have to think about it. It's just something I naturally do, because otherwise I would trigger it, right? But I think when you're first starting out, or you're starting on a journey, or you've just got a diagnosis, just be very honest with where you are right now. And if that's in complete stress and overwhelm, that's totally okay. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. It will come, throughout your journey. You'll start to learn what things make you feel better, what things make you feel worse, and how to manage it in a way that suits you. So that would be my advice, which I know might sound a little bit wishy-washy, but honestly, that I wish someone had told me that when I was just starting out with my IBS, because I just wanted all the answers straight away, and all that did was make me feel worse and more frustrated and overwhelmed, and then feel stressed, and then I'd get an IBS flare up.
Yeah, it's like a wave of too much information, and you can only get it in small bits and pieces or retain
So
it,
overwhelming.
especially with brain fog, right?
100% of brain fog. You don't know what you're doing when you got brain fog. You're like, what's going on?
And you have so many visions for the future, and you want to help so many people. I've read a lot about you, and talking about you right now, you have such a giving personality and love to help other people. What does mastering your gut health really mean to you, and what is your ultimate goal in your work?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think to me, mastering your gut health is you don't need to ask anyone for advice anymore. You know your gut so intimately that you know exactly what's going to trigger it. If you have a flare up, you can figure out why. You might not right in that moment, but if you really think about it, you can figure out why. And you just have complete control, and to the point where you can decide, I know if I do this, I'm going to get triggered and have bloating, but at the moment it's worth it. So I know if I go on a long haul flight, for example, it's going to trigger me, but I want to go on that holiday. So that's something I can live with. And I know that what I need to do when I get to the other side is to have a couple of hours of rest and relaxation, take my probiotics, keep hydrated, and that's how I can manage it. So just being able to live life, almost foreseeing what's going to happen with your gut, and to be able to live most of the time without symptoms, that's how I see mastering your gut health. And I'm sorry, I forgot your second question.
What is your ultimate goal with your work?
Yeah, my ultimate goal is to build a community of people where we can support and inspire and motivate each other to see health in a positive light, not in a disempowered light, because there are so many well-meaning like groups on Facebook or Instagram pages, but a lot of it I see is very clickbait, or it's very high anxiety, where people put in like, oh, I was in, people say, I was in remission, but now I've relapsed and I feel awful, and is this ever going to end? And then all you think when you see that is, oh God, that could happen to me. Or you see people trying to get follows on Instagram, and it's all like this one sign that you have colon cancer. And I'm like, Jesus, do we not have enough to worry about? Like, I don't need that in my feed on Instagram. It's like telling me this thing. So I just want to be able to lift people so they can see. And that's really what I try and do in my podcast, is deliver that information in a way it's easy to understand and fun to listen to. So you're not kind of going away feeling overwhelmed and stressed. You're feeling lighter after that. That's my ultimate goal.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And that's why I notice also with a lot of these forums and Instagram, everybody is really like, oh, I feel bad. Oh, I don't feel good. And poor me. And I'm just like, oh, I can't deal with it. It's
You're more
such a
than your
negative
condition as
Nancy.
well. It is, and I think that just makes it like, what I said at the beginning of our chat about how I felt way back when. It was almost my whole entire personality. I wouldn't date because of it. I would limit what I did because of it. And a lot of that was because of my symptoms, and a lot of it was because how I felt and how I identified with it. But it just, health doesn't have to be that way. Personally, I feel you can be in a place where you're empowered, and like you say, having so much negativity around it doesn't serve you in any way. It just makes you feel less, more disempowered than you already did.
Yeah. And you have a 4-step framework.
Mhm.
How does that help with IBS and how do you approach it?
Yeah, so the 4-step framework is, first we'll look at gut microbiome, because that tends to be prevalent in most people. There'll be some kind of dysbiosis. So we look at what's going on with the gut microbiome. What do we need to rebalance? What do we need to repopulate? Then we look at your food intolerances and sensitivities. What's triggering your symptoms that way, or which foods can your gut not handle at the moment? Because we could be repopulating your gut with beneficial bacteria, but if you're having food sensitivities that are causing inflammation, you're almost like taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and it's just going to really lag the process. So we look at food sensitivities too. Then gut inflammation, which is something that so many people overlook because no one really knows what it means, to be honest. But how inflamed is your gut? Like, why is there inflammation in your gut? Is it because you're lacking bacteria that help to reduce that, inflammation potentially? And then I look at stress. And stress is such a huge one. And for some people that I've seen in clinic, it's literally as simple as once they work on reducing their stress levels, their symptoms reduced by like 90%. Other people it's 50%, other people it's 20%. But it's such a forgotten thing that we live with every single day. We're almost always in some level of stress, and it has such a massive impact on the gut. So those are the 4-step process I go through, and each person will have a very individual response to each. So someone might be very bacteria predominant IBS or very food intolerance predominant IBS. So we'll kind of cater it, for that specific individual. When I say to people like, how stressed are you? Oh, no, I'm not stressed. I think you're just not in touch with your stress then in that case, because everybody's stressed to some degree. But yeah, it can be as much as soon as you reduce your stress, your bloating subsides by 90%. It can be that impactful. It's something that we really overlook because it's not tangible. It's not something we can necessarily see or take a pill for. And it sounds to a lot of people kind of a bit woo-woo, like, oh, how can stress impact the gut? But when you look into the science of it, it's massive. Like your gut and your nerves in your gut and how much it impacts even your sensitivity to your symptoms. It has a huge impact.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Mm.
I mean, every time I have a flare-up, it's because I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it totally makes sense. And learning how to deal with it in a graceful way is probably the best thing.
Yeah.
And finally, what's one thing you like every listener that's struggling with gut issues to take away from this conversation?
That you're not on your own with it. It's one of the most common things, I think, personally, that I never go to any social engagement where I don't talk to someone. They ask what I do, and they're like, "Oh, I've got IBS." It's so common. So we need to destigmatize it, but that also doesn't mean that it needs to be the norm. So many people don't talk about what they're experiencing because it's not, it's a bit taboo to talk about toilet habits or your gut bloating. But the more we talk about it, the more it's normalized, the more we think, oh, that person's feeling it too. And I've literally been at like a party where I tell one person that I'm a gut specialist, and then someone else is like, oh, I've got IBS, and someone else overhears, and there's like 4 of us all talking around about how we've all got IBS, and those 2 people have been friends for years and they never knew each other had IBS. So just to know that you're not on your own with it, but that doesn't mean that you have to live with it either. It doesn't have to be the norm, but it's super common.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're helping so many people feel better. And I'm normalizing that we all are dealing with some type of health issue is very important. And it's sad that we all are dealing with that. I mean, it's like you said, it's based in the food we eat and the food that the microplastics. I mean, just our world is so toxic that we really need to kind of take care of ourselves a little bit more and deal with those stressors in a better way. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or haven't mentioned that you would like to address?
I would just definitely encourage people to look into leaky gut if you have autoimmune conditions, because it's such a huge part. And I feel like it's quite empowering to realize, oh, this is what's going on and this is what's having an impact, because it then gives you the knowledge to start to make changes that, can help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. And you do have your own program and you do have your own podcast. Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, sure. So my podcast is called Gut Reactions. It's an IBS podcast. And yeah, I'll send you the episode to put in the show notes for leaky gut, because I think that would be great for your listeners. And yeah, I work in clinics online all over the world with people with IBS and gut health problems. So yeah, that's what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Autoimmune Warriors and others. I really appreciate your support and listening. I want you to be aware of 4 companies. One is Isla Health. They make it easy and helpful to track your lifestyle to reduce flares. But it's more than a tracking app. Isla Health uses data to develop a personalized care plan that works for your life. So why not check it out? Number 2, Adapt Naturals by Chris Kresser. I'm excited to let you know about BioAvail Multi. It gives you the full spectrum of ingredients that you need to thrive, like essential vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. So go to adaptnaturals/DES15. Use my code DES15, DEZ, to get 15% off your first order. And number 3, it is a autoimmune community, Brightly Thrive. Yes, it is an inclusive, fun space to learn, grow, heal, and shine brightly with others that are facing autoimmune challenges just like you. And last but not least is Leap Cure. Check out how you can benefit from their company and what their latest clinical trial is. So, thank you so much, and be stronger than autoimmune. Until next time. Guess who I just connected with, warriors? Leap Cure. Leap what? Leap Cure. Leap Cure connects patients with clinical trials to make research more equitable and efficient. Listen to their latest clinical trial.
If you've been diagnosed with thyroid eye disease and are seeking potential new treatment options, you might be interested in the LIDS clinical trial. If you're 18 and over, have a diagnosis of Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, and are interested in potentially participating in research, you can fill out a short questionnaire at lpcur.com/TED. You'll be connected with someone on the team to determine whether it might be a good fit for you. Check your eligibility and learn more at lpcur.com/TED.